for coming to hear about an update on the adoption status of our economic development element. Out of respect for everybody's time, it's 10:30, so we'll go ahead and get the presentation and then have an opportunity to ask questions. My name is Lisa Brinton. I'm a senior planner in the Community Development Department, and this has been one of my primary projects to continue the adoption process. Now, the economic development element would be the 8th element of the city's general plan. As you can see, we have 7 other chapters or elements, including land use, housing, circulation, etc. And the majority of these, except for community design, are mandatory elements. This economic development element is an optional element, and it shows the city's desire, its prioritization of economic development element and wanting to raise it to a legislative policy level to guide city decision-making processes. So the element has its roots back in 2013. The city identified the need to establish a roadmap, a vision, and context to guide economic development going forward. And the intent was that this would set the stage for the general plan update, which is slated to begin next summer, June 2018. So the city went through a fairly extensive community engagement process when it was preparing the economic development element to ensure that all community stakeholders had the opportunity to share their vision and focus. And what evolved from that was a document that really focuses on the outcomes of safety, health, and jobs, looking at prosperity for the entire community. And it has 3 priority focus areas. The first is workforce and education, land use, and then quality of life and public services. Now, in terms of hierarchy, this is a policy document, so it is organized in topic areas, and those topic areas are land use, circulation and infrastructure, retail, entertainment and tourism, job opportunities, workforce development, neighborhood and community areas, and then quality of life. And in each of those topic areas, then there are specific goals, policies, and action items that are identified. It was very important for the city that this was a policy-driven document and that it had action-oriented implementation items to move us forward towards that vision. I just want to run through and give you some examples of what are the types of policies and focus of each of the topic areas. First is land use, and the economic development element, or EDE, includes policies and action items that focus primarily on infill development, intensification of use within our city center core. And it calls for several area plans to be developed, such as visioning around Carr Lake, a revitalization plan for Chinatown, implementation of the Downtown Vibrancy Plan, a development of a community plan for East Salinas, the Alisal Vibrancy Plan that would also revisit a previous proposal for an Alisal marketplace. At the same time, the EDE recognizes the need for growth in future growth areas, and currently there is a specific plan being prepared for both the west area and the central areas identified in the pink. So this is the west area and central area, and that's predominantly residential uses, but there are some commercial components. The EDE identifies circulation improvements as well as infrastructure needed to support future economic development. So that's not only roadways, but improving infrastructure such as broadband, access to broadband, and the supporting wet and dry utilities, water, sewer, hookups, etc., that are needed to support that growth. The EDE recognized the importance of diversifying our economy. Currently, kind of the pillars are agriculture, hospitality, and then the government sector. And at least in the first two, agriculture and hospitality, you tend to have lower paying jobs. So the focus was on creating higher paying jobs and preparing our community for those jobs. And one of the primary focuses is on the ag tech innovation system, building on the asset that we have in agriculture and then preparing individuals for higher, more ag tech related jobs. There was also a big focus on supporting our existing businesses. They're the backbone. Small business is the backbone of our economy, and it's important to provide them access to capital as well as technical assistance to continue to grow and expand their businesses. A healthy community is not just about matching individuals with jobs and preparing them for the workforce. It includes quality of life and looking at the commercial areas and neighborhoods where they're living. And so there were many policies and goals focused on improving, beautifying, improving the health of our commercial and residential neighborhoods. Throughout the process, there was a community voice raised, comments raised to advocate for a section on quality of life. And then again, we're looking kind of at the whole picture, not just a jobs matching ratio. And so the importance of health, access to healthy food, access to recreational opportunities, as well as general public safety are all some of the goals and policies outlined in the EDE. So it was back in June 2014 that the City Council accepted the EDE as a draft strategic planning document. And the following year, in January, they authorized staff to move forward with the formal approval process to adopt it as a general plan element. And that included the preparation of the required California Environmental Quality Act document, which is an environmental impact report. And so that work began in July 2015. Early in 2017, the technical studies and reports were completed, and we just released September 5th a draft environmental impact report for public review and comment. And that public comment period ends on October 19th. So I want to take a moment and just share a little bit about the role of CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, and the purpose for the preparation of the Environmental Impact Report, or EIR. And its whole purpose is to provide information, to inform the decision makers of the proposed project's environmental impacts, and if there are any ways that impacts can be mitigated or even avoided. And it is, and the environmental document does not advocate a position for or against a project. And in CEQA, there are many different levels of required environmental review, which are listed. It can be from exempt all the way down to an environmental impact report. And the document that was prepared for the economic development element was an EIR. This slide just outlines the various components of the environmental document. And you can see that there's a project description. The EIR talks about what the existing conditions are, the current environmental setting. And then in all the topic areas, and those are just some of them listed, such as noise, traffic, air quality, water, land use. It analyzes the impacts and proposed mitigation as needed, as required for each of those topic areas. Under CEQA, there's also a requirement that we look at the project's cumulative impacts, looking at the context of other development that is proposed or underway, and we're also required to identify alternatives that may still achieve the overall project goal, but minimize impacts that have been identified. The real implementing document of the environmental impact report is the mitigation and monitoring report program, because that's what will hold the city, or the lead agency in this case, accountable for ensuring that the identified mitigation measures to reduce the impacts are implemented as outlined in the document. So again, the big focus of CEQA and the environmental impact report is on impact, identifying them, and there are different levels that CEQA identifies. It can be everywhere. It can start at no impact identified to one that cannot be mitigated and is significant and unavoidable. I'm not going to walk in detail through this, the EIR process, but just wanted to communicate that from the beginning, CEQA, as you know, a public disclosure process, includes the public from the very beginning and allows for public comment and input throughout the entire process, from the release of the notice of preparation all the way down to the public hearings where action is being taken by the decision makers. There are opportunities for public comment, both orally and written. As I mentioned, our draft environmental impact report for this project, the ETE, was released on September 5th. Documents are posted on our city website. A hard copy is here in City Hall at the Permit Center, as well as all 3 city libraries. And what I'd like to do now is kind of walk through some of the evolution in the project description that has occurred since the EDE was presented as a strategic plan document to the council in 2014. So when you look here at the figure on the left, you'll see bubble drawings. So these were the identified economic opportunity areas of focus for either infill development or expansion to support future job generating needs within the city. And so this is the figure that was developed as part of the EDE community engagement process and presented to the City Council. Subsequent to that, as part of the notice of preparation process in preparing the project description for the EIR, further refinements were made to more clearly define the 25 economic opportunity areas. And you'll note here on this figure, and so this is the refined figure, you will note here that there are some areas that are outside the city limit. The city limit is in yellow. And then there are others, some of them not filled in here, just outlined, that are the focus of infill development. Through the refinement process, we also needed to identify proposed land use for the areas outside of the sphere of influence and city limit. And so you'll see here, there were 3 land use categories that were identified. One is business park, which is the blue. The red is retail, and the purple is general industrial. Now, as part of this refinement process, we also took a look at what was proposed in the EDE as extension and realignment of the west side. In the general plan, it's called bypass. Here in the EDE, it's called expressway. As well as a realignment and extension of the east side bypass. It's called bypass in the general plan, but in the EDE, we're calling them expressways. And then the proposed addition of a third expressway to the south. Now, through the planning process, you'll see those here in the conceptual drawing as well. The whole intent of these expressways was to provide the infrastructure to support the future development in these proposed economic opportunity areas and to improve traffic circulation and flow. As we continued through the environmental review process, further calculations were done as to the actual land area needed to support future job creation. So when you look at this map here, you'll notice that we have here these blocks that are slashed, that have hashing. Those were called reserve areas, economic development reserve areas. And then the areas identified here with a box pointing to them, they were identified as target areas. So through the additional analysis, we took the economic opportunity areas and we said, okay, in our environmental review and our calculation as to what's needed, we really only need what's right now in the target area. And so the environmental impact report really only analyzes at a program level, high level, because we don't have specific projects at this time, proposed impacts within those target areas. The economic opportunity areas and the remainder, which we're calling an economic development reserve area, remains as in the economic development element as a guiding vision, but there's no land use change as part of the general plan amendment. And so these figures more clearly identify that. So you see that there are 6 target areas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 outside the city limit and sphere of influence, and 1 inside. This is Carr Lake. And the proposed land uses for those 6 target areas are here. Now you'll also notice that the expressways are no longer shown on these figures. And that is because, again, through our analysis during the preparation of the environmental impact report, it was determined that we did not have enough definition, enough information to evaluate them at this time, that they were not foreseeable projects. The policies identified for the expressways in the economic development element call for future studies to evaluate the location, the alignment of these proposed expressways. So at this point, they do remain in our economic development element as a conceptual vision, which can be revisited and refined as part of the general plan update. But in terms of what actions would be taken at this time with the adoption of the element, we are only proposing that the only land use changes that are being proposed are related to these target areas and identifying them as future growth areas for our city. Now, any proposed development within these areas would be required to do additional environmental review. And for those projects proposed in target areas outside the city limit, they would also have to go through the step of amending our sphere of influence and applying for annexation through LAFCO, which is the Land Area Formation Commission for Monterey County. So I just want to clarify that these are identified as future growth areas that would, and so it does not entitle development to occur immediately. They would have to go through a process for approval. So where are we at now? As I mentioned earlier, we're in the middle of our public comment period, which will close on October 19th. After that period closes, we will begin the preparation of a final EIR, including a response to all written comments received. We will be going to the Planning Commission in November 2017, and that would be a public hearing where the Planning Commission, one, would consider their recommendation on the certification of the EIR and the proposed general plan amendments to incorporate the economic development element into our general plan. The City Council would then consider those same items, EIR certification and EDE adoption, in December 2017. Now, there is some time sensitivity with the adoption of the economic development element. There is legislation in place which requires any general plan amendment occurring after January 1st must include a new mandatory element, which is an environmental justice element. And this focuses on land use in relation to different land uses and their impact on lower income communities and ensuring environmental and social justice. So that concludes my presentation. So I'd like to open it now to questions. I would like to, before I open it up, clarify that this is not a public hearing on the environmental impact report. The intent of this meeting is to provide informational update on the adoption of the economic development element. We went through a very extensive community engagement process, and we want to make sure, since there's been a lapse of time, 2014, 2017, we want to keep the community engaged as to where we're at today with the economic development element. This is not a public hearing focusing on the environmental impact report, so if there are specific comments on the environmental impact report, there are public hearings that will be scheduled, as well as we encourage you to submit your written comments.
Bill, have some politeness, respect.
There isn't water for any of this shit.
Let her talk.
If you want to discuss, we can discuss offline, but I think because people are going to get an update of the EDE.
Why is there EDE for something that is absurd?
We can make.
What does this look like to you?
It's not an intelligent question.
What does this look like to you?
Please respect the presenter.
Let her finish.
Why are we wasting time and money on something that is going to destroy this valley?
Please.
What is your name?
I won't ask please again, Bill. I will become a security guard.
Good,
Now
be a
shut up.
security guard. You're
You
the
will now shut
guy
up.
whose organization generated Land Watch, a total fraud.
If you want to discuss, we can discuss offline, but please respect.
If you have a
people
real question.
here that are here to listen,
Have this lady identify what these are?
She's only talking about the EDE, but I'm happy. I'm the community development director. If you want to discuss with me,
Put these up, let everybody see what these are,
Bill.
and tell me how you're going to mitigate
A
it.
lot of us in this audience knows that and sees that, but that is not what is on the agenda right now. So if you could
Why
just,
is there agenda when it's
If you
impossible
want to
for
ask the
development to
community
occur that
development
doesn't
director
destroy
to
our
put
She
it
says
water?
they will schedule,
if you put it
that.
on an agenda, you need to speak.
I have repeatedly brought this up, and yet this is like Nightmare on Elm Street, and Freddy and refuses to die. It's
Honestly,
absurd.
the community is not at the same level of concern that you are. So if you could please put
If they
your-
knew, they would be.
We know, and you know that I know. So I would appreciate it if you would stop interjecting your personal philosophy.
It's
into
not a
this.
philosophy. This is not a philosophy. This is reality.
Please lower the
Please,
temperature.
if you want to talk to me, I'm the appropriate person to talk to. If not, I'm going to have to ask the police department to come in and escort you out. We're trying to.
Why not?
We're
I
trying
think
to
this is so
conduct-
serious, such a horrible misuse of funds, money,
If
and
you want to
public
discuss with
time.
me, we
You're
can
wasting
go-
people's time.
Yeah.
Thank you
I'm
very
not
much.
wasting anybody's, you may regard it as a waste of
All right, I'm going to
time,
have to.
but I regard
I'm
the
gonna have to
future of
Let's
the
go.
valley
All right,
as a
all right,
very
Bill,
important
Bill,
issue.
Does anybody else have a question?
Right.
Yes, I'm open for
Thank you.
questions.
We'll
And
try to-
and before we, I also want to make sure there are flyers. This is not the only community meeting that we are going to hold on this topic. We are holding a meeting in the evening for those that are not able to come during the day. And it's going to be on Tuesday, October 17th at the Salinas Community Center in Sherwood Park, the Santa Lucia Room on the second floor. That's 940 North Main Street. From 6:30 to 8 p.m. And it will be very similar. It'll be the same presentation, but we will also have tables regarding each of the topic areas for those that are wanting to learn about the economic development element in more detail and have questions.
Did anyone have any questions?
Gloria does.
Lisa,
Yes, Gloria.
Gloria Moore. Can you briefly say what could be some of the things, I haven't read the EIR yet, I plan to do it, but are there some things in the EIR that cannot be mitigated?
Yes. There are identified,
You had your turn.
again, because this is a program level document, a more conservative approach was taken, especially like with aesthetics, impacts to viewshed, impacts to agricultural lands, noise, increase in noise from traffic. Those are some of the key ones where we declared it to be significant and unavoidable. In other cases, where the project may have generated a significant impact, it could be reduced to less than significant with mitigation. And I realize that the environmental impact report is a rather daunting, thick document. However, there is a more condensed summary at the beginning, which includes a table of all of the identified impacts, the level of impact, prior to mitigation, proposed mitigation, and then what the resulting impact is analyzed to be. So that kind of gives you a snapshot summary, and then you can identify areas of concern and go read more information in the appropriate topic chapter.
So now in these public forums that you just spoke about, will the EIR be under discussion or will the economic element be under discussion?
Only the economic element. These are not public hearings where we would be receiving comment. We want to make sure we are correctly and accurately receiving all comments, and so that we ask that they be submitted in writing so that we can make sure that comment is correctly captured, as well as then we can respond to it.
Thank you.
Did you provide to the public your email address?
My business cards are out on the table, and and the environmental documents are on our city webpage under the Community Development Department, the notice of availability with the link to the documents, as well as my contact information. is also on the city website, but my business cards are out front.
And we have hard copies of the entire EIR. I think some of you were paging through it out.
Yes, I have a copy there, as well as there's a hard copy in City Hall, the city clerk's office, in all 3 libraries, and at the permit center.
Can I take Megan's copy home with me tonight?
Yes.
Just to be clear, the documents, the EDE and the EIR are available at the city webpage, Community Development Department tab?
Yes,
Gotcha,
yes,
Thank you.
that's correct. Under documents for public review, you'll see
Perfect, thank
public
you.
review documents. Yes.
So Lisa, first off, thanks for the great presentation. I had a question about the areas outside the existing sphere of influence. So what happens if another proposal comes up for one of those areas? Does it just work through the county development process? How much does it take into consideration the EEP?
Again, it would depend on the location, but if it is contiguous to the city limits, we would work with the county to process the application entitlement to go through the sphere of influence amendment and the annexation. So that is a good point. Just because at this time we're only identifying 6 target areas, that does not preclude future development proposals from coming forward and going through the entitlement process.
And just to add, I mean, if it's outside our jurisdiction and in the county and it doesn't require anything, obviously, you know, that project could proceed through the county permitting process.
But more than likely, because we're surrounded by agricultural lands, they too, going through the county, would have to go through use designation changes. So we work collaboratively because of the adjacency.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa, you mentioned the environmental justice element is going
Yes.
to be required
Yes.
for the game. How does that relate to, you were saying we're under kind of a timeline in terms of...
Right.
I didn't understand the correlation.
So, yes, so to clarify, if we do not adopt the economic development element into our general plan by December 31st of this year, we will have to wait until we initiate our general plan update process mid-2018. At that time, we would also be undertaking the environmental justice element, so we would not be able to proceed.
Just now I'm confused. So if you are able to get this through before the end of this year, you won't have to include the environmental justice element?
Correct, at this time. And so our intent is not to and I don't want to misconstrue, it's not that we do not want to do an environmental justice element, it's a matter of timing. This economic development element, we began its preparation in 2013. And when we began that process, the whole idea was that this would guide our future general plan update, set the vision and the context and prioritization on economic development. And subsequently, this new mandatory element has come into play. What we would like to do is adopt our economic development element, just again set the stage for the general plan update, and then of course go through a thorough process of developing an environmental justice element for our general plan. So it's a matter of timing, not a desire not to or not to. It's just timing and setting the stage.
What is the legal process for blocking this cockamamie nonsense?
Oh, gosh.
Again,
Ask your attorney.
I'm not a legal counsel, so I would have to defer you. Yes.
The existing economic element does look at job creation, I presume?
We currently do not have an economic development element. Oh, yes. So this, the policies and goals, action items do focus on job creation, industry diversification, and preparing the workforce for those jobs.
I assume, I don't know, I would say, not look at justice, the proposed justice, those would be questions that, in terms of impact, that such a proposal would have. So, have you seen what the economic justice analysis would include at this point?
I personally have not, and Megan could speak more to
I'm
that.
asking to the extent that if those questions already included within the economic development element already.
I think that there are some topics that are touched on in the economic development element in terms of improving neighborhoods, quality of life, health, and safety. So they would definitely complement the future environmental justice element. But it's my understanding at the high level that this is looking kind of at land use. And for example, where are we placing our affordable housing? Is it near PG&E transformer stations or industrial uses? And is there, how are we looking at our land use and equity as a whole?
Yeah, and just to add, when the economic development element came about, we actually had a lot of input and collaboration with building healthy communities and a lot of the folks that felt initially that they wanted to make sure that the plan was going to result in jobs for all Salinas residents, not just, bringing folks in from the outside. So the economic development element does keep in mind trying to, ensure, for example, with ag technology, we're focusing a lot on working with Hartnell and, getting students who are children of farm workers prepared for kind of the next iteration of jobs, better paying jobs. So that is a focus, and the EDE is really trying to make sure that it doesn't just benefit a few, but it benefits the residents.
So that narrative is embedded within the
Yes.
element? Okay.
But you throw market rate in there and you lose all of that.
Well, this is more, not so much market rate housing, but this is more about jobs, facilitating jobs and making sure that you're facilitating jobs for the broadest segment of the community. And there's a big push on workforce development because we do want to make sure that, again, that there is a lens of equity on the plan, and it's not just a few that benefit, but that we can prepare even those residents who don't quite have the skills yet for the next generation jobs, bring them up. So that's a big push, because we want to make sure that people are able to tap into the higher wage jobs so we can lift people out of poverty.
Any other questions? Megan and I will, if there are no other questions, Megan and I will be here. If you would prefer to ask them individually, but I thank you for your interest in the EDE, and
Thank you.
thank you.